Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. College football is over this season. In the NFL, the playoffs are still going on, but college basketball is coming back into the forefront, and we've got one of the biggest rivalries in college basketball on tap with the Purdue Boilermakers traveling on the road to face their arch rivals in the Indiana Hoosiers. A lot of people think this is one of the best college basketball rivalries in the sport, right behind UNC and Duke, and it definitely is. Purdue and Indiana have had some great matchups in the past. Purdue, for a long time, though, in the 2010s, dominated in the rivalry, but Indiana has been getting back on track in the rivalry, knocking off the Boilermakers 3 out of the last 4 times, as you can see right here. Indiana won in Bloomington in 2022, and they swept the Purdue Boilermakers last year in 2023, knocking them off both times when they were not really expected to win, especially the game at Purdue. But I would say that all eyes are going to be on this matchup on Tuesday night, but the game's on Peacock, which is an absolute disgrace. This game should be on FS1 at the very least, but it is what it is. A lot of people probably will get Peacock to watch this game, and they probably should, because this is going to be a fantastic matchup between these two rivals. I know Purdue is 15-2, and they're 4-2 in conference play, and they are ranked number 2 in the nation. They fell from the number 1 spot after losing to Nebraska last week on the road. And UConn is now the new number 1 team in college basketball, but Purdue is still ranked number 2, having a fantastic season. They only have losses at Northwestern and at Nebraska on their resume, and they also, as you can see, have wins over Xavier this season, Gonzaga. They knocked off Tennessee and Marquette in the non-conference, and they did beat Iowa, Alabama, and Arizona as well. So they have a lot of good wins. They also beat Illinois in the Big Ten as well, and they just blew out Penn State. So outside of those 2 losses at Nebraska and at Northwestern, they've had a great season with a lot of quality wins. That's why they are a projected 1 seed in the NCAA tournament right now, and they still have an argument to be ranked as the number 1 team, but I guess that loss at Nebraska was enough to knock off the Boilermakers from the top spot in the minds of the AP voters. But they've done a great job this season, and we know they are led by Zach Edey. This season, he's putting up great stats again like he did last year. He's trying to get player of the year again. He's averaging 22 points and 11 boards. Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer have increased on their points per game from last season. Braden Smith is averaging 12 points. Fletcher Loyer is averaging 11 points. Lance Jones has been a revelation as well for the Boilermakers. He transferred in from Southern Illinois. He's averaging 11 points per game. Trey Kaufman, Ren Mason Gillis are having decent seasons, averaging 7 points per game and 6 points per game in the front court. And Miles Colvin and Ethan Morton are a couple of guards that play off the bench for Purdue. They have a solid team overall, but definitely Zach Edey is the cog that makes that engine run. But the issue is for Purdue, their 2 losses this year have been on the road, and Indiana is a much tougher environment than Nebraska and Northwestern. If you look at what Indiana's done this season, they have had a much worse year than Purdue, even though the record is 12-5 and they're 4-2 in the Big Ten as well. So both Purdue and Indiana have the same conference record. This would be a big win for either team to help them stay in the Big Ten title race. But Indiana struggled with a lot of the smaller opponents on their schedule in the non-conference. They got blown out against UConn, beat Louisville, knocked off Maryland and Michigan, lost to Auburn and Kansas, but they were close against the Jayhawks at home. But then they lost at Nebraska and at Rutgers, but they beat Ohio State, Minnesota at home. So outside of a 4-point loss to Kansas in Assembly Hall, Indiana has not lost at home this season other than that, and all of their other losses have been on neutral site games or on the road. So the Indiana Hoosiers, they have one of the best home environments in college basketball, just like Mackey Arena, even though a lot of people would argue Assembly Hall is a little bit better. It fills up more people, and it used to hold concerts back in the 1980s and 1970s. Assembly Hall is built very different than most college basketball stadiums, how the stands sit up looking almost vertical. It's a crazy environment, and Indiana fans, they are passionate for their team, even though the Hoosiers have struggled since the 1990s when Bob Knight was the head coach. Indiana has 5 national titles. They've got a beloved fan base. They just have to find a way to continue having some success. And even though Matt Painter has had more success at Purdue in the last 15 years in the Big Ten, even though Purdue has struggled to advance the NCAA tournament, Matt Painter is a very experienced coach, and he is one of the longest tenured head coaches in the Big Ten behind Tom Izzo, whereas Mike Woodson at Indiana, even though he has all the head coaching coaching experience and assistant coaching experience in the NBA. He doesn't have that in college basketball, but he has helped Indiana be an improved team from the Archie Miller era, where Archie Miller, he never had the Hoosiers being able to knock off Purdue in this rivalry, whereas Mike Woodson in 2 short years has gotten Indiana to 3 wins over Purdue out of 4 tries. You see Malik, Reneau, and Kel'el Ware, they lead the Indiana Hoosiers in points per game at 16 points and 15 points respectively. Trey Galloway and Mackenzie Mbako both averaged 10. Xavier Johnson is a key factor in this game. He's been injured this season, and he's struggling right now, but he's back out there. And as he gets more healthy, maybe he'll be able to improve on that 8.5 points per game that he's put up so far. Anthony Walker, the transfer from Miami's averages 7 points per game for Indiana. Mike Woodson did a really good job in the portal in the offseason. He brought in Kel'el Ware also from Oregon. CJ Gunn's averaging 3 points. Caleb Banks 3 points as well off the bench. Pate Sparks, the Ball State transfer, is averaging 3 points. And Gabe Cups, the freshman's averaging 2 points as well. So as you can see, Indiana doesn't have that guy that they really can rely on like Purdue does in Zach Edey. When Purdue is really struggling and their other players aren't getting the job done, Zach Edey can just go out there and give you 30 points. Kind of like Indiana's had the past 4 years in Trace Jackson Davis. Jackson Davis isn't walking through Assembly Hall anymore, so the Hoosiers, they're going to have to rely more on Malik Reneau, who is getting much better, but he still isn't a complete go-to scorer yet. He is very improved this season, but Indiana's going to need a lot from Kel'el Ware and Malik Reneau to possibly be able to get this win, and enough from their backcourt and Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway to be able to outperform Braid Smith or Fletcher Loyer, or this could be a long day for Indiana, and Purdue might be able to get their first win in Assembly Hall in over 3 years. But who do I think is going to win this game? I think it's going to be a very close game. Both of these teams do not like each other, just like North Carolina and Duke. And even though Indiana has struggled in the rivalry overall in the last 10 years, Mike Woodson has brought that fire back to the Hoosiers. He's not going to have his team go out there and struggle like Archie Miller's teams did against Purdue. This is a different Indiana team. Even though they're not currently in the NCAA tournament field and their net ranking is terrible because of the fact that they struggled against a lot of their non-conference opponents and got blown out against some of the bigger teams on their schedule, Purdue's a great team, but they have proven that they can lose on the road in lesser environments at Nebraska and at Northwestern. It's going to be tough for Indiana to contain Zach Edey, but the Boilermakers are going to have a tough time slowing down all of Kel'el Ware, Malik Reneau, Mackenzie Mbako, and Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway. I'm going to go with the Assembly Hall Magic and Indiana to find a way to be able to knock off the Purdue Boilermakers and get their first signature win of the season to get themselves back into the NCAA tournament conversation with a 71-69 win over Purdue. I know a lot of people are going to go with the Boilermakers, and with good reason. They're a great team. Their players like Braid Smith and Fletcher Loyer are improved from last season, and they might learn from the mistakes that they did make at Indiana last year. The Hoosiers, on paper, have a lot of talent, but they are probably a worse team than they were last year by a decent amount since they don't have a Trace Jackson Davis on their team. But since Indiana needs a big win to get themselves back in the NCAA tournament conversation, the fact Purdue has lost on the road a couple times this year in lesser environments, and Mike Woodson is the head coach for Indiana, and he knows how important this rivalry is between Indiana and Purdue because he played at Indiana back in the 1970s. He cares about this game. He's going to get his players prepared. You know Matt Painter will as well. He's a really solid coach, but I think on Peacock, Indiana's going to find a way to upset the Purdue Boilermakers, and yet another great edition of this classic college basketball rivalry. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think that the Indiana Hoosiers can knock off the Purdue Boilermakers at Assembly Hall this season, or whether you think that Purdue can get their first win at Indiana in over 3 years. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.